Michael stared at the note on the kitchen counter, his coffee growing cold in his trembling hands. The morning sunlight streaming through the window seemed too bright, too cheerful for what he was reading. "I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. Don't look for me. The children need you now." That was it. 15 years of marriage reduced to 2 sentences scrawled on the back of a grocery receipt. Sarah was gone. "Dad?" 8-year-old Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. "Where's Mom?" "She always makes pancakes on Saturday." Michael quickly folded the note and forced a smile. "Mom had to go away for a while, sweetheart. How about I make those pancakes?" 12-year-old Jake wandered in moments later, already suspicious. He had their mother's sharp eyes, the ones that seemed to see through everything. "Her car's not in the driveway," he said flatly. Michael's hands shook as he reached for the pancake mix. How do you tell your children that their mother has abandoned them? How do you explain something you don't understand yourself? The first weeks were chaos. Michael, a software engineer who worked long hours, suddenly found himself thrust into the role of single parent. School pickups, grocery shopping, homework help, bedtime stories. Tasks that Sarah had handled effortlessly now felt like climbing mountains. He called in sick more days than he could afford, hired a babysitter he couldn't really afford, and survived on frozen dinners and takeout. The house felt hollow without Sarah's laughter, her humming while she cooked, her gentle voice reading bedtime stories. Emma cried herself to sleep most nights, asking when Mommy was coming home. Jake became withdrawn and angry, his grades slipping as he acted out at school. Michael felt like he was drowning, grasping for any explanation that would make sense of their shattered world. After a month of silence, Sarah finally called. "How are the kids?" she asked, her voice distant, formal. "How do you think they are?" Michael's voice cracked with exhaustion and pain. "Emma asks for you every day. Jake won't even talk about you. Sarah, please, just tell me why. What did I do wrong?" There was a long pause. "It's not about what you did wrong, Michael. I can't be that person anymore. I can't pretend anymore." "Pretend what?" But she had already hung up. Michael threw himself into being both mother and father. He learned to braid Emma's hair by watching YouTube videos at midnight. He attended every one of Jake's soccer games, cheering loudly enough for 2 parents. He cooked actual meals, helped with homework, and slowly began to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. The children began to heal, or at least adapt. Emma's tears became less frequent. Jake's anger softened into a protective stance toward his little sister. They formed their own little unit, bound together by circumstance and love. But Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something crucial. Sarah's words echoed in his mind. "I can't pretend anymore." Pretend what? 6 months after Sarah left, Michael was cleaning out their bedroom, something he'd been putting off, when he found her journal wedged behind the nightstand. His hands trembled as he held it. Reading it felt like a violation, but he needed answers. The first entry was dated 3 years ago. "Michael brought me flowers today for our anniversary. He looked so proud, so happy. I smiled and thanked him, but all I could think about was how I felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. How long can I keep pretending to love someone I never really loved?" Michael's blood ran cold. He flipped through more pages, each entry a knife to his heart. "He told me he loved me again today. The guilt is eating me alive. I've been living a lie for so long I don't even remember who I really am anymore. Jake asked me today if I love Daddy as much as Daddy loves me. I lied to my own son. What kind of person am I? I found love letters Michael wrote me when we were dating. He was so sincere, so genuine. He deserved someone who could love him back the way he loved me. Instead, he got me. Someone who married him because it was expected, because he was safe, because I was tired of disappointing my parents. Michael sat on the bedroom floor, surrounded by the debris of his marriage, reading entry after entry that detailed his wife's secret unhappiness. She wrote about feeling trapped, about going through the motions of being a wife and mother while feeling empty inside. She wrote about therapy sessions she'd attended without his knowledge, about the overwhelming guilt of deceiving him every single day. But the entry that broke him completely was dated just 2 weeks before she left. I overheard Michael on the phone with his brother today, talking about how lucky he is to have found his soulmate, how he can't imagine life without me. Tom asked him what the secret to our happy marriage was, and Michael said it was because we truly loved each other, that we were best friends as well as lovers. I had to leave the room because I started crying. He has no idea that everything he believes about us is a lie. He has no idea that I've been performing for 15 years. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep destroying him with my deception. He deserves to find real love. Someone who will look at him the way he's always looked at me. The children deserve a mother who wants to be their mother, not someone who goes through the motions out of obligation. I'm going to leave. It's the most selfish thing I'll ever do, and also maybe the most honest. I'm going to set him free, even though he'll hate me for it. Michael closed the journal and wept, for the marriage that never was, for the love that was never returned, for the 15 years he'd lived in blissful ignorance. But strangely, mixed with the pain, was something else. A twisted kind of relief. It wasn't his fault. There was nothing he could have done differently. Over the following weeks, the journal entries helped him understand Sarah's behavior in a new light. Her reluctance to have physical intimacy that he'd attributed to stress. Her tendency to deflect serious conversations about their future. The way she'd sometimes look at him with what he'd thought was love, but now realized was probably pity. He remembered their wedding day, how beautiful she'd looked, but also how she'd seemed distant during their first dance, like she was somewhere else entirely. He'd attributed it to wedding nerves. Now he wondered if she'd been mourning the authentic life she was giving up. The hardest part was realizing that their children were born into this deception. Sarah had been good mother, patient, caring, involved, but it had all been performance. Even her love for Emma and Jake had been complicated by her resentment of the life she felt trapped in. 3 months after finding the journal, Sarah called again. "I heard from my sister that you're doing well with the kids," she said carefully. "We're managing," Michael replied, his voice steadier than it had been in months. "Michael, I found your journal," he interrupted quietly. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. "I'm sorry," she whispered finally. "I'm so sorry." "Why didn't you just tell me?" he asked. "All those years, Sarah, we could have gotten divorced when the kids were younger. We could have found a way to co-parent without all this deception." "Because you loved me so much," she said, and he could hear her crying. "Because you were such a good man, and I knew that leaving would destroy you." I kept thinking maybe I'd grow into loving you the way you deserved. Maybe if I just tried harder. But you never did. I never did. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to tell the truth. I felt like such a fraud, such a terrible person. You'd tell people how happy we were, and I'd have to smile and nod, knowing it was all built on lies. Michael found himself feeling sorry for her, which surprised him. You were trapped too, he said softly. That doesn't excuse what I did to you, to the kids. No, it doesn't. But I understand now why you left the way you did. They talked for an hour, the most honest conversation they'd ever had. Sarah explained that she'd moved across the country, was in therapy, trying to figure out who she really was without the weight of pretending to be someone else. She asked about the children, and Michael told her honestly how much they'd been hurt by her leaving. Do they hate me? She asked. Emma still asks about you. Jake is angry. He feels abandoned. They were the only real thing in that life, Sarah said quietly. My love for them was real, even if everything else was fake. Then why did you leave them too? Because I was drowning, Michael. I was becoming someone I hated, and I was terrified they'd grow up seeing that version of me and thinking that's what mothers should be. I thought maybe they'd be better off with just you. After they hung up, Michael sat in the quiet house, listening to his children playing upstairs. Jake was helping Emma with a puzzle, their voices mixing in the comfortable way of siblings who'd grown closer through shared loss. He thought about the journal, about 15 years of believing in a love that was never real. But as he listened to his children's laughter, he realized something important. The love that mattered most. His love for them. Their love for each other. That was real. That was solid. Sarah had been wrong about one thing. She thought she'd been protecting him by pretending. But the truth was, he'd been living in a cage of pleasant lies. Now, for the first time in 15 years, he was free to find real love, authentic connection, genuine partnership. It would take time to heal from the deception, to trust again, to believe that someone could love him genuinely. But he was only 42. There was still time for a real love story. Emma appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, despite it being afternoon. Dad, Jake says we should order pizza for dinner. Pizza sounds perfect, Michael said, pulling her onto his lap. But first, how about we call Grandma and Grandpa and see if they want to come over? As Emma ran upstairs to tell Jake, Michael looked around the living room. For months it had felt like a museum of his failed marriage. Now it just felt like home, messy, lived in, real. He thought about Sarah, probably sitting in some apartment across the country, finally free to discover who she really was. He hoped she'd find happiness, genuine happiness, not the performed version she'd given him for 15 years. And for the first time since she'd left, he truly meant it when he whispered, I forgive you. The truth had set them all free. Now it was time to build something real from the pieces that remained.